There is a force more powerful than words, more piercing than sound, more enduring than any structure humans have ever built. It moves unseen through the spaces we ignore. It whispers not to the ears, but to the soul. It is silence, not the silence of emptiness, not the absence of noise, but the living, breathing silence, the kind that hums beneath every heartbeat, beneath every thought, beneath every desperate attempt to fill the void. Most people fear it. They run from it. They drown it under endless distraction, constant talking, constant scrolling, constant doing, because silence strips away the illusions we build to survive. In silence, there is no audience to impress, no mask to wear, no role to hide behind. Only you, as you are. Silence does not judge. It does not praise. It simply reveals. And what it reveals terrifies those who have forgotten who they are. It shows you your longing. It shows you your fear. It shows you the stories you cling to, the ones you inherited without question. But it also shows you something deeper. It shows you the clarity beneath the noise, the awareness untouched by your failures, your triumphs, your identity. Silence isn't empty. It's full, overflowing with the truth you've been too busy, too frightened, too distracted to hear. And if you can stay with it, if you can withstand the discomfort long enough to cross the threshold, you'll find a power there that nothing in the external world can offer, a power that doesn't shout, a power that doesn't demand, a power that simply is, waiting, watching, ready. At first, silence feels heavy. It wraps itself around you like a dense fog. You sit inside it and fidget. You reach for your phone. You replay conversations in your mind. You make lists, plans, distractions. Because in silence, you can't hide from yourself. Every unfinished emotion rises to the surface. Every ignored dream knocks at the door. Every wound you thought you buried whispers through the cracks. You realize how much of your identity was built from noise, other people's voices, society's expectations, your own restless inner monologue trying to fill every second with thought. In the absence of sound, the mind panics. It rushes to create, to fill, to explain. But if you resist the urge to run, if you sit still inside the rising discomfort, you begin to notice something extraordinary. Underneath the clamor of thoughts, underneath the tightness in your chest, underneath the layers of fear and craving, there is a stillness that has been there the entire time, unmoving, untouched, unbothered. It was never gone. It was never broken. It was simply buried under 1,000 layers of noise you mistook for yourself. And as you drop deeper into the silence, a strange thing happens. The mind slows. The narratives dissolve. The frantic need to define, to control, to perform fades. You don't disappear. You emerge. The real you. Not the character you play, not the mask you wear, but the raw, breathing presence that has witnessed every moment of your life without judgment, rises to the surface. And you begin to see, silence is not the absence of life. It's the space where life reveals its true face, without agendas, without distortions, without fear. Silence is not passive. It's not emptiness. It's the canvas upon which everything real is painted. When you dwell in true silence, you don't become weaker. You become precise. You start to see patterns where before there was only noise. You start to sense undercurrents that words could never describe. You start to hear life speaking to you in a language older than speech. The world teaches you to equate noise with power. The loudest voice wins. The biggest movement matters. The most visible success defines truth. But real power doesn't shout. Real power doesn't need to be seen to exist. It hums beneath the surface, invisible and unstoppable, like the roots of a tree breaking concrete from below. When you root yourself in silence, you tap into that kind of power. You are no longer blown about by every thought, every news headline, every opinion from people who don't even know themselves. You move differently. You listen differently. You act differently. Your energy stops scattering in 1,000 directions. It consolidates. It focuses. It becomes dense, potent, undeniable. You start to feel the difference between reaction and response. You don't lash out at life anymore. You meet it. You meet conflict with calm. You meet chaos with clarity. You meet uncertainty with the unshakable awareness that you are not defined by what happens. You are defined by how present you remain when it does. This kind of presence cannot be faked. It cannot be taught through information. It can only be discovered through direct, personal confrontation with the silence inside you. And once you touch it, even for a moment, you realize all the things you thought you needed to control were never yours to control. All the battles you thought you had to fight were illusions. All the noise you thought you had to answer was never even addressed to the real you. The real you was always here, waiting, watching, ready. There comes a point where the silence stops feeling foreign. It stops feeling like something you visit. It becomes who you are. You no longer need to force yourself into stillness. You are stillness, even while you move, even while you speak, even while the world rages around you. You stop chasing answers like a desperate wanderer. You realize that the deepest answers are not found by asking louder questions. They are revealed in the spaces between questions. You stop fighting your thoughts. You stop wrestling your emotions. You let them rise. You let them fall. You let them pass. Not because you are detached, not because you no longer feel, but because you recognize they are movements of energy, not the foundation of who you are. And from this place of silence, a new kind of clarity emerges. Not the clarity of having the perfect plan, not the clarity of knowing what will happen tomorrow, but the clarity of knowing who you are in the face of the unknown. You no longer seek safety and certainty. You find your ground in the unchanging awareness that watches everything rise and fall. In silence, you see that thoughts are weather, emotions are tides, circumstances are winds. But you, what you truly are, is the sky that holds them all. And when you realize this, something extraordinary happens. You stop fearing the storms. You stop fearing the pain. You stop fearing the change, because you understand none of it defines you. None of it can touch the silence at your core. And from that silence, real power moves. Not the power to dominate, but the power to endure. Not the power to manipulate, but the power to transform. You no longer act out of desperation. You act out of alignment. You no longer chase life. You meet it, breath by breath, moment by moment, presence by presence, until life and you are no longer two things, but one. If the silence inside you is starting to awaken, subscribe and stay connected to the source. When you move from silence, your actions change. They are no longer reactions, automatic, conditioned, desperate. They are movements of awareness, deliberate, grounded, alive. You don't speak to fill the space anymore. You speak because something real is asking to be expressed. You don't act to prove your worth anymore. You act because your being naturally overflows into creation. There is no rush in you, no need to win arguments, no need to dominate conversations, no need to leave your fingerprints on every moment, trying to force it to mean something, because you realize life doesn't need your control, it needs your presence. From silence, every moment becomes an invitation, not a demand, not a test, an opening. You meet people not to change them, but to see them. You meet challenges not to defeat them, but to understand what they are teaching you. You meet yourself, not the version you perform, but the raw being that watches, breathes, witnesses. You realize that most of the suffering in life doesn't come from what happens. It comes from the stories you tell about what happens, the judgments, the comparisons, the endless spinning of meaning where sometimes none is needed. In silence, you let events be events. You let people be people. You let yourself be whatever you are in this breath, without forcing it into some shape you think the world expects. And in that allowing, life opens up. Not because it becomes easier, but because you stop resisting its natural flow. You don't lose yourself by being silent. You find yourself. You don't become smaller. You become vast. And for the first time, you realize that the most powerful force in the universe isn't about controlling anything at all. It's about being so present, so rooted, so clear, that life bends around your stillness like a river bends around a stone. Silence doesn't end when you leave the meditation cushion. It follows you into the kitchen, into the streets, into the noise of daily life. It is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of internal noise. You can be in the middle of a busy market, with sirens wailing and people shouting, and still be inside the vast, unshakable silence. You can be sitting across from someone who is angry, anxious, projecting their fears, and instead of being pulled into their storm, you remain the clear sky. This silence isn't a withdrawal from life. It's a deeper participation. You become more awake, not less. More engaged, not less. More attuned to the subtle rhythms that most people miss. You feel the weight behind a friend's forced smile. You hear the sadness woven into the laughter of a stranger. You sense the longing behind the anger of someone who lashes out. And you respond not from your own woundedness, but from the stillness that sees beyond masks. You realize that most of what people call communication is just noise bouncing off noise. True connection happens in the spaces between words, in the silent recognition that we are all made of the same substance: awareness, longing, light. And as you live from this space, your life stops feeling like a series of disconnected events. It starts to feel like music, a flow, a dance between inner and outer, between seen and unseen. You stop living on the surface of life. You start living in its depths. Every moment becomes sacred. Every conversation becomes an opportunity for presence. Every breath becomes a prayer, not the kind spoken, but the kind lived. And in this way, silence doesn't just change how you experience life. It changes what life is. When you live from silence, your creation shifts. You no longer create from a place of lack. You no longer chase achievements to patch the holes in your identity. You no longer build monuments to your insecurity, hoping the world will approve. You create from fullness, from overflow, from a well that never runs dry. You move not because you need to prove you exist, but because existence moves through you effortlessly. In silence, ideas rise, not as frantic sparks, but as calm, complete visions. Solutions present themselves, not through force, but through resonance. Opportunities align, not because you chased them, but because you became the kind of presence they naturally orbit around. You realize that true creativity is not an act of forcing something into being. It's an act of listening so deeply that what is already wanting to be born can move through you without distortion. And so your life becomes art, not just your work, your way of being, your conversations, your relationships, your choices. Every step you take is a brushstroke. Every breath you take is a note in the symphony. And you start to see the beauty you were too busy, too afraid, too distracted to notice before. The way light falls on water, the way a child's laughter cracks the tension of a heavy room, the way the earth breathes through the trees. You realize that life has always been speaking, always been singing, always been offering itself. You just had to be quiet enough to hear it. In this space, miracles are not rare. They are natural. Synchronicity becomes a daily language. Grace becomes your atmosphere, because you are no longer creating from separation. You are creating from union. Union with the deeper rhythms of life. Union with the intelligence that breathes galaxies into existence. Union with the silence that holds everything together without saying a word. Living from silence doesn't mean life becomes perfect. It doesn't mean challenges disappear. It means you stop being imprisoned by them. You realize that freedom was never about changing your circumstances. Freedom was about changing your relationship to them. You move through victories without becoming inflated. You move through losses without becoming shattered. You walk through praise and criticism with the same steady presence, knowing that neither one defines you. You understand that everything the world offers, approval, rejection, gain, loss, is just weather passing across the sky of your being. And so you stop bargaining with life. You stop demanding guarantees. You stop postponing your peace for some future moment when everything finally lines up just right. You take your peace now. You take your presence now. You take your power now. Because you see clearly, nothing was ever missing except your willingness to stop running. In this space, life becomes play again. Not childish play, not reckless play, sacred play. You engage fully, but you don't cling. You love deeply, but you don't possess. You create passionately, but you don't identify. You realize you were never here to conquer life. You were here to dance with it, to taste it, to move with its rhythms without trying to force your own. And paradoxically, in surrendering your need to control life, you find that life responds to you effortlessly. Doors open, paths unfold, connections spark, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped resisting the current you were meant to flow with all along. And in that surrender, in that effortless dance with life, you rediscover the one thing every soul is secretly seeking: the home that was never lost, the belonging that was never broken, the silence that was never absent, only waiting for you to remember. The journey into silence is not a path you walk once and finish. It is a way of being you return to again and again. It is the home you carry with you when the storms come. It is the clarity you anchor into when the noise of the world threatens to pull you under. It is the memory of something timeless moving beneath everything you thought was important. You realize now, you were never searching for answers. You were searching for the space in which answers become unnecessary. You were never seeking control. You were seeking the freedom that comes when you realize control was never the point. You were never chasing success. You were chasing the feeling of being at peace with yourself, regardless of what you achieved or lost. And you see clearly that peace, that home, that freedom. It was always inside you, buried under noise, hidden beneath fear, masked by the desperate clamor to be something, to prove something, to hold something. But silence was there all along, patient, untouched, unchanging. It doesn't demand that you change who you are. It simply invites you to remember who you have always been beneath the forgetting. And now that you've tasted it, even if only for a breath, even if only for a heartbeat, you cannot unknow it. You cannot return fully to the noise, because a seed has been planted, and in time, it will grow into presence, into clarity, into a life lived not from fear, but from freedom. The only real question left is this: if you stopped filling your life with noise for even a day, what might you finally hear? Tell me below. Not the first thing your mind says, the thing your soul has been whispering all along.